welcome to On the Media's very first live stream ever.
Good afternoon, I'm Joe Baker, a member of the Delaware Tribe of Indians.
Good evening, I'm Terrence McKnight. I'm the host of Evenings with Terrence McKnight on WQXR, the classical music station in New York City. This evening, we're being treated to a new performance by the Grammy Award-winning Catalyst Quartet, performance they recorded in our green space. Now, this is a very special performance for me because at the station, we did a documentary on Florence Price back in 2013. Florence Price, an American composer born in Arkansas in 1887, came to prominence in the 1930s when the Chicago Symphony played one of her compositions. She wrote more than 300 compositions. Many of them were lost, so we're still in the age of finding Florence's music. Tonight, we're going to hear some of her music, and Dr. Raylinda Brown said, this music may have been written as early as 1927, but the manuscript includes a final date of 1951. I'm talking about the 5 folk songs in Counterpoint. That's with some of her other work, Florence's other work. It's based in spirituals, where the simplicity of these folk melodies is contrasted beautifully with her contrapuntal technique, each voice against and with one another. Well, words can only convey so much. Luckily, we've got the Catalyst Quartet leading us through a performance. Catalyst Quartet, 5 folk songs in Counterpoint by Florence Beatrice Price. Swing Low, Sweet Chariot, one of the 5 folk songs in Counterpoint by Florence Price. It was played in the green space by the Catalyst Quartet, violinist Carla Donahue Perez, Abby Fayette, Paul Araya plays viola, and Carlos Rodriguez, the cellist, bringing the special treat lot from the green space, music by Florence Price. I'm Terrence McKnight here with you, the evening host on WQXR. I've got members of the quartet in with us to kind of talk about Florence Price, talk about how they came to know her music, and see what else we'll talk about. Quartet members, are you there?
Hello.
We're here.
We're
Hello.
here.
Yes. Swing Low, Sweet Chariot. I heard Shortening Bread, Peace Clementine, all this music by Florence Price, taking folk songs and turning them into counterpoint. That's something that, you know, somebody like Sebastian Bach was known to do. Thanks so much for recording this music. As you all know, her story and this music is sort of personal to me because I've been around it for quite some time now. So how did you all come to discover Florence Price's music? I doubt that many of us heard about her in music school.
Well, beyond your incredible documentary and so much other great writing by other people that have sort of come to know her, we heard about this music from friends and like through the grapevine. And we've actually, you know, we're devoting the second album, the second volume of the Uncovered Project to Florence Price specifically. And the reason she's the second volume is partly because we're still discovering and getting her music. It's not all readily available. So it's all through grapevine, it's all through word of mouth. Oh, so-and-so knows so-and-so, and oh, there's another piece you don't know about. And, you know, there's a great violin teacher at the University of Arkansas where her, all the body of her work exists, basically. Her name's Dr. Kong. And she's become a great resource. And, you know, we'll talk to some random person somewhere and they'll hear about the project and they're like, oh, I'm going to put you in touch with so-and-so because they know this person. You can get this. It's not the way it should be, but it's the way it is right now until we get it all out there.
Yeah. In listening to this music, for me, I talked about Florence Price's story being personal for me because of the research, but also because of the music. I mean, I listened to these songs, man, and I can remember hearing these songs being sung around the house, you know, by my grandparents. And I know my mother used to sing to me that Shortening Bread song. Mama's going So for you guys, do you all have that sort of association with the music? Was this stuff, were these tunes you all heard growing up? And if not, how do you find your space in it?
I think for some of us, we heard some of this music. I'm a little older than other members of my group. And it was part of, like, you know, for instance, Shortening Bread was part of a cartoon series and not a very flattering way. And there's also the Merry Melodies cartoon, which had Drink to Me with Thine Own Eyes in it. And also in a unflattering way with Owl Jolson. And so it's a part of an American musical tradition in different respects. But for us, I think as a group, we've really dived into researching really phenomenal recordings of these pieces. And luckily we're in the information age where we can access YouTube, and it's a lot easier these days. So some of our inspirations for these folk songs in particular were people like Mahalia Jackson with Calvary, which is the first movement. There's a wonderful recording of Aretha Franklin singing at the White House for the Clinton administration of what is that?
It's Calvary, right?
Calvary, yes. No. Calvary's Mahalia Jackson. Drink to Me with Thine Own Eyes, Aretha Franklin. Then, of course, the Fisk University Jubilee Singers for the very first apparent recording of Swing Low, Sweet Chariot. And that's incredible to have. And then it gets a little sketchier with Oh My Darling Clementine and some of the others, which aren't traditional spirituals, but have been brought into this folk song set by Florence Price.
Yeah.
I think based on what Carlos was just saying, it's also important to share that in our discovery and our experiences with all of these folk songs as individuals, it's just as he's pointed out, not all of them are actually, true folk songs, but are actually kind of pop songs that were popular during Florence's era, things that she would have heard around as, popular music. So I think that's interesting how she borrows from both of those traditions in the same piece.
Someone wants to know, we got a lot of folks watching this around the world, and they want to know from you guys, because I can't really respond to this. What is it like to play in the green space compared to, compared to other places that you play?
I think Paul is our resident audiophile, so he can speak to that acoustically and beyond.
Sure. Well, I mean, it's a huge honor. I know. I think we've all sort of grown up and seen performances in the green space. So I think aesthetic-wise, it's a really great energy, and it's really awesome to feel the energy of having this huge audience that and this reach that you're going to get. And acoustically, I would say that it's a clean space. So that's something you don't necessarily get from a concert hall, whereas we can hear each other and you can hear all the little inner voices, and which is really important in a string quartet, especially in a quartet that's contrapuntal as much as the 5 folk songs. There's all this little information that might get swallowed up in Carnegie Hall per se. And so that it would be the benefit. And the thing that you have to work at in a drier space like the green space is you have to work really hard to get resonance, basically. And articulation comes very easily, especially on string instruments. So we have to work on sort of being really coaxing with the string and being really careful with the type of sound we're producing. And I would say the difficulty playing in a string quartet is that we have to really get inside of each other's sound to make a group blend, because the space doesn't give you the blend, it gives you the clarity.
Now, Paul, or maybe Abby, or Carla, you want to take this. I'm wondering about this counterpoint, Florence's counterpoint. Is she like a contrapuntal composer like Sebastian Bach, or was she more like Handel, who tended to blend, homophonic textures with his counterpoint? Who did she look back to for her advice on counterpoint?
I have to say that I think she's kind of like her own crossbreed of all these different people. I think maybe more like Bach because of her use of textures. I think that she uses a lot of really complicated textures and rhythms to weave these pieces and take us on these journeys. I find her to have a really dense writing. So I would say it's more like sometimes it takes you into Strauss. Sometimes it takes you to Mahler. Sometimes it takes you to something much more simple and open, kind of maybe even Haydn. So she really goes for so many different textures and sounds, and that's kind of part of what makes this piece so incredible.
Mm-hmm. I mentioned earlier that Florence Price uses in a lot of her work that we've found so far. There are a lot of melodies that come from plantation melodies or Negro folk life. There was an article in the American Arts Journal back in the day when Florence was around, and it says, the idea of using Negro music as a basis for a new school of American music seems ridiculous. These melodies are so incipient and trivial that an American would be ashamed to derive his inspiration from such trash. Besides, a Negro is a Negro and belongs to Africa, not to America. So the fact that you all are recording all of this music, and the fact that we've come where we've come from over 100 years ago in terms of, the validity and viability of this music, shows just how blind we were 100 years ago. But clearly, we've got a long ways to go. And in this next music that we're going to hear, her string quartet, do we hear any of this, any reminiscences of her growing up in Arkansas, being, teaching in the South, or Chicago jazz? What are we to listen out for in this next music?
I think interesting about the next piece is that it's an unfinished work from 1929. And so that says two things. It says how much of this piece actually is what she, the end product of what she actually wanted, which is sort of really interesting to work on, because it could potentially be a working piece. But also the fact that the date 1929 is so attached to this work. It's not just called the String Quartet in G major, it's the date 1929 is part of it. And I think what you really do hear is that 20s sound, that 20s harmonic language. It was a very important year, as an unfinished quartet from 1929 could speak to the stock market crash or anything else. It's a really interesting sound world that she gets, and it's much less dense and heavily crafted than the piece we just heard, but it's nonetheless beautiful and nonetheless uniquely her voice.
Yeah, well, let's hear it. This is the String Quartet in G major by Florence Price, recorded in the green space by the Catalyst Quartet. You just heard the Catalyst Quartet performing the G Major String Quartet by Florence Beatrice Price. We played that live in our green space. Good evening, I'm Terrence McKnight, evening host on WQXR. Oh, so delighted to hear Florence Price's music in the green space. I mean, this composer was born in 1887, lived until 1953. And we're just delighted that you're here to enjoy her music with us. Catalyst Quartet, I want to ask you about the string quartet, because you said that it was unfinished. And I'm listening to both movements. It sounds like she had a nice round ending to the string quartet. I mean, and then again, you think about Schubert, you know, who did a similar thing with the symphony way back when. What's your take on this?
I just, you know, I've always thought, not always, but in my knowledge of this work, I've always thought that maybe she didn't get around to finishing it. But then when you think about when we've now been seeing her actual manuscripts, maybe she intended it to be unfinished. Yeah.
That's Carlos
because it's
Rodriguez.
Very clean, beautiful writing that she puts down in her manuscript.
Yeah,
it's not a sketch.
Let me be sure our audience knows exactly who you are. That's Carlos Rodriguez. He's the cellist in the Catalyst Quartet. The violist is Paul Araya, and Abby Fayette plays violin, and Carla Donahue Perez plays the other violin. They're all here with us to have this conversation about Florence Price. We began listening to her folk songs in Counterpoint. We just heard her string quartet. And coming up to close out the show, we've got a piece. She wrote a piece called Negro Folksongs. Is that the correct title?
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah.
And there's a little bit of confusion over this piece because people aren't sure if between the 5 folk songs in Counterpoint and the Negro Folksongs in Counterpoint, which one's which. And we discovered it because through the research we were doing and the scholars that we were interacting with were like, oh, by the way, there's another quartet. And here it is. Yeah.
Now you're going to play one piece from this set. And I know I have a suspicion because I get folks sometimes who will email me or call me and talk about ownership of music and who gets to play what, you know, as non-Black or players of non-African descent. Do I get to approach music by Langston Hughes, or poetry by Langston Hughes, or music by William Grant Still, or Florence Price in this case? And, you know, when there's a title like Negro in the title, how do I approach that? And I'm just wondering if you all have those conversations. Is that something you all consider, think about, weigh out? Do you have any perspective on that?
Totally. I mean, I personally asked you this question, Terrence, because I want to know more. I want to know what's going on. I want to know what's right. I want to know what's important. And I loved your answer that you gave me. You said it's a word that was meant potentially to bring a little bit more respect to people that may have been called other things. Yeah. And I really like that. And for sure. I mean, our affiliation in the quartet with the Sphinx organization has tied us to not just this music, but to the entire, what we would like to now call the canon of African-American composers and Latin American composers, and the breadth. And we've always presented, in the history of our 10 years together, we've always presented all of this music on the same programs with Beethoven and Brahms and Schubert. And it's just part of what we've always done. And I guess the sense of propriety and all of that, we've just always looked for great music, and that's just what we've been about. And I'm not German, and I play German music all the time, and so it's sort of like that's how I make sense of it personally. And we've had these discussions in the group and with other people, and I think they're important conversations to have.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I think go forward and play the music, respect the culture and play the music. You know, I remember when I did my documentary on Bernstein's Black America, I contacted most of my Jewish friends to make sure that because Bernstein was very Jewish, his father was very religious. And I wanted to make sure that I hit the nuances just right, you know, that I was sensitive to the culture. And
I think you did. I heard you do a presentation of that on QXR last month. I think you did that. And I thought it was really on point. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thanks so much for recording this music and all the work that you all do. And introduce us to the last piece, and we'll let this be the final word.
Who wants to go? I can go. You want to go?
Go for it. You can go.
Okay.
Go for it.
Little David Playing Your Harp. It's a wonderful movement from the Negro Folksongs and Counterpoint of Florence B. Price, which is in 4 movements. You are going to hear, I don't know if I can say this actually, but probably a world premiere, or at least a recorded premiere, because this is a very newly discovered work in a way. We had the very great fortune and privilege of actually having her manuscript, which is the only way this exists. And we very much look forward to putting it down on a recording in volume 2 of Uncovered. But this song is really a great tune. You can hear an original version from 1919 sung by the Harlem Hellfighters from this on gramophone, like old style with a needle and the whole 9 yards. And it tells the story of David against all odds, doing all the jobs, slaying Goliath and playing on his harp as if life and all the things that we have to come against were no bother to him, because he could just do it all. So little David, go playing your harp.
Little David, Play on Your Harp, from Negro Folksongs and Counterpoint by Florence Price, recorded live in our green space by the Catalyst Quartet. I'm Terrence McKnight. You can always join me on the radio, but join the Catalyst Quartet. They're going to be back next month. They'll play music by George Walker, Jesse Montgomery, Coleridge Taylor Perkinson on that program. You can go on to our website and find out about all of our offerings, find out and view recordings, and just have a good time at thegreenspace.org. I'll see you next time. Thanks for joining us.